I call the member for Maitland.
One of my first jobs in the Commonwealth Public Service back in the 1990s was in an area of the Department of Immigration known as Refugee Law. This section was established to try and deal with the growing area of litigation that had emerged from the number of boats arriving in Australia. In my time there, one of my jobs was to read, classify and archive applications for refugee status of many of the asylum seekers who had come to our shores in the late 1980s and early 90s. I've read more of their stories than I care to remember, and they were harrowing. The first asylum seekers since white settlement arrived on boats in Australia in the post-war period. They were invited in with open arms after the Second World War. Many of them transitioned through accommodation at Greta, which is partly in my electorate of Maitland, between 1949 and 1960. Over 100,000 people seeking a new life in Australia passed through Greta Camp throughout its 11 years of operation. The next boats arrived in the 70s from Vietnam, and again it was easy for Australia. We opened our arms to these people fleeing a regime that we had been at war with. Since those times, some Australians have not been as generous. Some within our community at different times have questioned the right of people to seek asylum by boat. We have heard terms such as economic refugees, queue jumpers, and calls to stop the boats, and we've been asked repeatedly who will bear the cost of resettling these people. These are not the words of a civil society. This is not the language of a generous and caring nation. These are the words of a defensive and frightened community that is manipulated to think that we're a small nation, that we do not have room on our lands or in our hearts for those who flee torture, persecution and trauma. In 2013, Army Chief David Morrison said in an unflinching video that quickly went viral that there was no place in the Army for those who exploit and demean their colleagues. He added, if we are a great national institution, if we care about the legacy left to us by those who have served before us, if we care about the legacy we leave to those who in turn will protect and secure Australia, then it's up to us to make a difference. He continued saying that the same goes for those who think that toughness is built on humiliating others. If you become aware of any individual degrading another, then show moral courage and take a stand against it. These words are so powerful and I believe apply across all areas of social justice in our community. And in this space, I guess we can say that refugees are our colleague, as they are in our planet. And this is the key. As humans, it's easier to think of people rather than numbers, particularly when the number of people affected is so large. We think of people locally who can't get a job or who are homeless, and we prioritise them, and we forget about the many thousands of individuals who are suffering at a level we cannot even begin to comprehend. I'm relieved that the image of the lifeless body of little Aitchison was finally enough to put a face for our community on this crisis, which has raged for far too long with inaction and indifference from our community. We only have to look to the words of our national anthem for an inspiration of how we should act when faced with such a crisis. Beneath our radiant Southern Cross, we toil with hearts and hands to make this Commonwealth of ours, renowned of all the lands, for those who come across the seas with boundless plains to share. With courage, let us all combine to advance Australia fair. We have a proud history in this nation of standing up for our mates, whether it be in the battlefield, on the school ground or in our neighbourhood. As a mature nation in this centenary of Anzac Year, we should be opening our hearts to those that come across from the sea, fleeing torture and trauma. I welcome the announcement by the Prime Minister today that Australia will accept another 12,000 people today, over and above Australia's existing humanitarian program. I applaud the leadership shown by the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition, which have no doubt had an impact on this decision by providing pressure on the Prime Minister and all Australians to do the right thing. Thank you.
I call the Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I'd like to put on the record my thanks to the member for Maitland for those comments. This is an issue that shouldn't relate to partisan politics. It should relate to the needs of the humanitarian efforts that are required in order to support these people that have been displaced. What we are seeing overseas are events like we have never seen before, and it is incumbent upon us, first and foremost, to think of the effect on those families and people who have been displaced. I cannot begin to imagine the horror, the trauma that those people are going through right now. We are a generous nation. We are a bountiful and plentiful nation, and we should be generous in these very difficult times. I'm sure, like all members of the House, my heart goes out to every child, every woman, every man I see on the news with these horrific events. I thank the member for Maitland for her comments and join with her in her call of support of these families and these distressed people.
We're hearing Parliament.